Our final speaker in this session is Paul Oakley, and changed tack slightly to look at the digital agenda. So we're delighted to welcome Paul. He's a director of BIM at the Building Research Establishment. He's a chartered architect and acknowledged world expert in building information modelling. Heads up the BIM division in the BRE, as I said, where he's responsible for technical delivery of the BRE Academy training. There's a BRE Academy stand in the foyer. Paul also sits on the board of Smart Buildings UK and Ireland and leads the operational activities for the chapter under the secretariat role of BRE. It's fair to say that our industry has received a significant jolt from the advent of digital technologies. You see the disruptive potentials, as both the previous speakers have touched on. So that jolt is providing threats to the industry with skill shortages, etc., but also great opportunity. So I've asked Paul to give us his thoughts and insights on where the digital journey that we've commenced might lead us. Thank you, Paul.
Okay, thank you for the invite here today. So it's not quite my first trip to GMIT. I've been here quite a bit involved in training, and some of our BIM courses and that are taken up by GMIT. I'm the director for BIM at BRE, but I'm really talking to you about all the sort of stuff that's going on generally. But BIM is the heart of change going on globally. So Pat's already touched on learning lessons from the past. And for almost over a century, people were saying we need change within construction. 76 report from the BRE talks about unclear project information and the amount of cost this was putting on to industry. We've had all these reports coming out from the UK saying how construction is not performing correctly. And we're down to modernise or die, of course, and then we had Carillion to follow it up. But the tragic events at Grenville and then the Hackett report on that are big players, not just in terms of what is going on within the UK and the effects on construction, but even a project I visited here yesterday, the impact on that is being felt not just UK, Ireland, but across the world. And there are lots of other reports that the UK have done, basically going in to all the aspects of how we need to improve. Going back to things like rethinking construction, the figures, 30%, you'll hear this, 15, 20, 30%. We know we can improve. And accidents, as Pat had mentioned, that is one of the major issues in terms of adding cost to construction. Never waste a good crisis. That showed that actually industry was not performing, but when we did research demo projects, it could all be done, it could all be achieved, but it just wasn't what industry did on a regular basis. Farm, again, issues there. All the symptoms are still there why construction does not perform. And we still actually haven't gone back and resolved those basic issues. And then up to last year, it's not just a UK, Ireland project. PlanGrid did a look across North America, even down to Australia, as well as the UK, Europe. About 2/3 they feel is productive. About a third of what everything done related to construction is waste. That's huge amounts when you look at the profitability of most of the firms within the construction space. So there's massive opportunity to get rid of that waste and change the way that we work. Hackett, again, one of the things that comes out of that is this golden thread of information. And a lot of what I'm going to talk about today is the issues in terms of delivering that, but the opportunities it also presents. So a quote from various reports, Production Information 2002 in the UK, information is invariably inaccurate, ambiguous and incomplete. So how do we know? Well, basic 2D drawings. You can see the architects overlaid with the engineers. We can't even align the stairs. We can't align ducts, pipes, etc. We have basic coordination issues that are not resolved. Of course, 3D is going to resolve all those problems. Except when you get those sorts of clashes in the middle because people actually haven't coordinated their 3D models. But then the designers are, well, it'll move on to site and it'll be resolved by the contractors on site. So it's this blame game across construction as we keep moving things. And a little engineering problem. So Luffenberg Bridge, Switzerland, Germany. Something as basic as sorting out the datum. So they agreed the datum would be sea level. Unfortunately, one chose the North Sea, the other one chose the Mediterranean Sea. But a clever German engineer realised that there was a difference between the two. Unfortunately, he got it the wrong way and doubled the difference. Okay, so just these very basic things in terms of setting up your datums, agreeing things, establish them, checking them before you move too far can cause major issues on construction. And everything we've been doing in terms of changing in construction, people put up blockers. Whether it's cost, in the BIM world, software, etc., legal, my professional indemnity insurance won't allow me to do it, the contracts won't do it, the technology is not capable. All these excuses industry puts up why we shouldn't change. But we need to change. In the UK, on the BIM side, all these standards were written to enable change to take place. They've now moved into an international scenario. So just recently, last month, ISO 19650 parts 1 and 2 were launched and made available for use. And these are now an international standard to allow adoption of what was originally the UK BIM Level 2 to take place. So BIM, what is it? I'm just going to give you a quick basic overview of what we're talking about. So it's not just 3D CAD. Okay, we were doing that in the 80s. Okay, it's not new technology. There are people doing it now. But I like this definition by the UK BIM Task Group about collation exchange of shared 3D models and intelligent structured data. And it's that intelligent structured data which is going to change design, constructions, operations and maintenance. It's going to change the way we all work. But it's also about this. It's about better information management throughout that whole process. So the trouble with BIM is we can't even agree what the definition is. Some people are talking about BIM as the information model. So they buy a piece of software, they create a 3D model, and they say they're doing BIM. Other people are delivering new things from that model. So actually how they go about modelling to extract cost, visualisation, construction sequencing, the modelling process depends upon what the deliverables they need to deliver. And then we get the information management bit, the whole BIM Level 2 from the UK, which is the whole process of how you manage the flow of information and you control the flow of information. So we have what thing is produced, how that thing is produced, and then the who produces what and when. And they're three different things. The bottom one, you need to do the other two. But unfortunately, people can go and buy a piece of software and say they're doing BIM without worrying about the other things involved with it. So we need standardised definitions of what's going on. When we talk about BIM itself, the graphical model, that's the flashy bit, that's the people everybody likes. Okay, but as equally important to that is the non-graphical information. If we're going to get to this structured data bit, that is the bit that's going to change the industry. And if you think about those two, from that, we're going to get the documentation. And as long as these are coordinated, the documentation are just reports from the databases of the graphical and the non-graphical information. Now, I speak at events globally, and within the UK, the BIM Level 2 has been the big push. But globally, it's this. It's Industry 4.0 or Construction 4.0 they're talking about. How big data, AI, use of IoT, drones, off-site prefabrication, virtual realities, augmented realities, mixed realities, all these sorts of things are going to change the way that we do construction. And these things are happening. There's plenty of things going on which are driving these agendas. And it's just about how much of this is all joined up is really where the benefits are going to be. One of the other pushes is digital twins. So at the BRE, our integer house, and actually most of the site of the BRE, we've got a full BIM model there. And this particular one, that is used as our smart home, so it's full of sensors. But then we've linked the data from the sensors into the BIM model. So we can then visualize the BIM model based on current sensor data. And we can actually get IoT linking into BIM to help us look at how the building actually performs. This just shows some of the technology available to us. And this has been carried out by the RPS team here within Galway. And what it shows is the capabilities of the software that's presently available. The fact that we can go from point cloud data and that this can be turned into actual models by a team, some of who were trained at GMIT, working in Galway on a project on the Gold Coast of Australia, the other side of the world. So we are in a global economy. Okay? Work is not just fixed to one location, and it depends on the skill sets, the knowledge, the use of this technology in terms of how you can improve the way you want to work. They can see that the visualization in terms of we're no longer 2D drawings showing to clients. They can actually see how things are, not just in the design, operations, but in future use. So with BIM, the whole perception was, and this comes from Construction Excellence, that BIM was all about design and construction. But the reality is something else. That design and construction is tiny. If we can sort the structured data out in that bit, that can push into the operations maintenance, into the business costs and the business outcomes. We can change the way that we all live by resolving a lot of these things. But there are a few technical issues to sort out. So one of the big pushes within the UK was how we dealt with delivery information. And the requirement in the UK on the BIM Level 2 was to deliver this thing called COBE. So when I started, delivery was easy. It was drawings on the drawing board. We moved to CAD. We delivered paper. And then a lot of people moved to BIM, and they still delivered paper. Prettier paper, more colours on it, but they still delivered paper. And then suddenly we had this requirement to deliver COBE. COBE as structured data. And suddenly, what you call things becomes important. The namings, the attributes, all the information you put on your model is actually going to be used by people downstream. So suddenly you need to start controlling that flow of structured data. Now the perception was this thing, a BIM object, was going to resolve that problem. Because it had the visualization information, it had the non-graphical and the symbology, and you could use that non-graphical information to meet your requirements. But the trouble is, a lot of these were created by various vendors. So everybody saw this massive opportunity to go out and get manufacturers to create BIM objects, and they could sell them and host them for them. And so we've got BIM Store, National BIM Library in the UK, Revit Store, BIM Objects, but they all did it differently. So just taking a wall and putting 4 windows in it, I did a little exercise. We can see we've got the 4 windows scheduled out, and we have 1 value for acoustic rating. I've then put in a National BIM Library window, and whereas I have a number against my acoustic rating, they have almost a full specification as text. And then we brought in BIM Store, and they have another acoustic rating, which is a formula. And then BIM Objects, who just call it acoustic, actually have a URL to where the value is stored. So if I want to extract structured data for acoustic rating, which one of those 4 columns am I going to get? That's the problem that we have. What data type am I going to get? That's the problem that we have. And we need to resolve this if we're going to move forwards. National BIM Library, so a window for one of their manufacturers, and there's all the information associated with it. There's the next page, and the next page, and the next page, and the next page, and the next page. 6 pages of this data associated with the window. What it doesn't give me is, what's the size of the glass? Something as basic as that if you're trying to work out what the daylight coming in through that window, or the thing you're most likely to need to replace in the window is when the glass breaks, you don't have that information. So this whole start with the end in mind scenario has been lost, where people are not thinking about what information needs to be delivered for operations and maintenance. And then how do we deal with automated regulation checking of these things if we don't have the core information that we need? So we've been doing some work over the last 3 years at the BRE in terms of trying to standardize data templates. So we create a template for each object and we define what information, the formats, units of measure need to be associated with those. And we've created an ecosystem that we've used on various research projects, etc. So we have data templates, and then we have methods for manufacturers to populate their information against that data template. We then have plugins, so authors can put it into particular tools or even into some of the viewing capabilities. We can then use things like COBE to extract structured data. Because we put the information in to a standard, we can now extract it. So it can now be useful. And it can then be taken into FM solutions to give them the information that they need to maintain and operate. So we've got this whole data flow working in a standardized way. But the work we were doing was very limited. And something that has changed is that the UK government has actually recognised that they need to invest in construction. And we now have this Construction Innovation Hub project between the Manufacturer Technology Centre, BRE and the Centre for Digital Built Britain. And with sponsorship from Innovate UK. Now, I've heard you've had this scenario in Ireland that the government's invested in lots of these other sectors. That's what's happened in the UK. But now, actually, we have got some funding for construction. In the UK, we've had the 2025 reports in terms of how construction needs to be 33% better in operations maintenance as well as construction, how we need to deliver faster, etc. So there's big drivers for change which are pushing this by the UK government. But they have put their money where their mouth is. They've provided 72 million for the initial project to really look at how we can change construction for the better. So the 3 parties, the Manufacturer Technology Centre, generally based up in Coventry, BRE and the Centre for Digital Built Britain, all have different elements that they're looking at. One of the first packages that comes under my remit at BRE is looking at how we deal with product data and how we look at digitisation of the building regulations. And those issues that I've been talking about for several years, we now have actually an opportunity to get on and to start to resolve. So the issues in terms of all those information from brief, specification to construction to how we maintain, operate, refurbish, etc., they all define data requirements that we need to capture. The manufacturers all have their data, and if we can basically get the requirements and the manufacturer's data, we can then start making decisions based on structured data, not on guesswork. And that's going to change a lot of the way we can do things. The whole structure of these things, we have a process in terms of we're looking at it as an ontology. So when you're looking at a door, you're no longer just looking at a door, you're looking at all the components of it and the data associated with those. And then general things about manufacturers' general information, the supply chains, products, all these things together to allow decision making. And then the use of AI and these other things can then start to use this to help inform decisions. And that allows us to basically have master information and then particular use templates to meet particular requirements. Now, one of those will be automation of regulations, etc. But the issue is at the moment we have things like we have manufacturers' data, we have requirements, but that needs to tie in to the instance in a particular location. So by standardising all these different data sets, we can then start doing formulas and rules-based stuff to actually take these things on board to help make proper informed decisions so that the thread that Hackett talks about can actually be achieved. So Construction 4.0 is happening across the world, from South America, China, as well as the things going on in Ireland and the UK. There is fantastic opportunities for change. We know that the old ways of working are not productive, that we need to change, and really there's an opportunity for the new generation coming through to embrace that change and actually make it work. So thank you very much for listening. I hope you found it useful. Thank you.